Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me again on the Neon Salon. I am joined today by writer Frank Westcott. Frank, thank you for being here today.
You're welcome.
And you are coming from Canada, is that right?
That's right. Just north of Toronto in Ontario.
So we'll just jump right into it with kind of our
Sure.
standard format of questions, and then we'll go into your bibliography and your work. How did you get started in writing?
Strangely or interestingly, in retrospect, the bedroom that I had as a kid for the first 9 years or so, there was a great big bookcase beside me with tons and tons of books in it. Of course, they were, books that adults would want, way beyond me, but I was fascinated by all these writers making these book things. So that goes back to a very early age, 4, 5, 6. And then when I was in grade 4, I'd taken to writing for some reason. I just felt drawn to it. And I wrote a story as part of our creative writing class. This is grade 4. And I still remember it. My teacher in green pen wrote, word usage beyond your years. And I thought, holy cow, maybe I can do it. And that stayed with me. Leap forward to 1979. I acknowledged that particular teacher in the people for my first book was dedicated to. I never forgot. And I always remembered that green writing. So anyway, the bottom line is it was in me early on. And then I was in grade 4 still. That teacher read a book called Snow Dog by Jim Kelgar, the dog story. And I was totally enthralled by that someone, first of all, that kind of story could exist. And two, that it wasn't real, that a human being was able to create that out of their imagination. I was just in awe of that. And I began reading his books, all of them, and in awe of the writer who made them. Then in grade 5, the following year, teacher read a story by Morley Callahan. This story, it was called Luke Baldwin's Vow, another dog story. So I was drawn to that too. But it was just a magnificent story, and I will never forget it. When I heard that story, I could not imagine that anyone could write something as so beautiful, moving, emotional, and just so everything. And I never lost that in terms of Morley's writing in the years when I grew up and actually read his big books. Grade 6, I got hooked into Walter Farley, who was a horse story writer. And the same thing occurred. And then as the years went by, I gradually wrote more and more on my own. And another book and writer who I became enthralled with, it was around that same 10-year-old period because I was getting into playing hockey. There was a book called Scrubs on Skates, written by Scott Young, who is Neil Young's dad. And Scott Young was a sports reporter and he wrote a lot of books for kids, actually, hockey books. And it was a really good story too. So that was the one non-animal book that I was affected by early on.
So you really came to writing from reading, it sounds like.
I would say, yeah, that's very clear. And I remember a little image before I was old enough to read or write, being downstairs in the basement because there were books. My house where I grew up was filled with books. It was littered, books everywhere. And I remember having some paper and making squiggles that a kid could only make, like I wasn't even in school yet, and thinking that I was writing. I don't know why, but it's an image that I've never forgotten.
Would you consider yourself a full-time writer? I know you're a musician as well.
I've wrestled with the concept since my early days, because for whatever reason, I was blessed or cursed with a variety of skills that were doable out there in the world, and some I had greater passion for than others. And I made money from virtually all of them at one time or another. So anyway, to answer your question, first off, do I consider myself a full-time writer? And have I always? Yeah, because I am a writer, plain and simple. I've always written. I think anyone who writes, and it's part of their life, such as brushing their teeth, exercising, getting groceries, part of their regular thing, not by force and not necessarily for a paycheck, I never want anyone to feel less of themselves as a writer if they're not putting food on their table as a result of it, and it's their main source of living income. You can take an Olympic athlete, or say a pro hockey, we're talking hockey, take somebody playing for say Fleury.
Mhm.
He's a pro hockey player. Is he a real hockey player? You're damn right. But if you take, how old is he now? What, early 30s? If you take the number of hours that he has spent developing his craft and playing hockey, yeah, significant. But is that all he does? No. There are a lot of other things he does. And I think that's the same for anyone who's really good at, or their heart is just glued to something that they do. It might be raising roses for the joy of their family.
When you're talking about any creative pursuit, it's sort of weird, this idea of being a professional at it. It's difficult to sort of figure out how to fit it all together, how to fit the art and the money together, because they don't really often seem to want to get along.
No, and I don't, to me, and it's a tough thing to reconcile, because the people out there will say to you, well, are you making any money from it or whatever? That's big on their thing, and it's hard to fend off. I think if there's some kind of internal wrestling with the issue, then that person is a pure creative individual with that particular art form. So otherwise there would be no wrestling with it. Take actors, for example, because their times of income, even if they are successful enough to earn money from it at different times, and even if they're Academy Award winners, the reality is the income is, they might earn income for 3 months and not act again for 12, and yet they might win awards and have all kinds of accolades, but they could not live the rest of their life, as an actor. But if you ask anyone, are they an actor? Yeah, you're darn right.
You started a press. You mentioned the Blue Heron Press back in '79, and then you began publishing your work through that press. So '79, that was well before the internet, well before Amazon, well before everything that a self-published or independent author knows today as their, basic tools of how to self-publish. What did it mean to self-publish a book back then? What were the kind of steps you had to take?
It was huge, and it was all consuming. I had no idea it would be as consuming. I was teaching at school at the time, but the bottom line is I did my creative stuff when other people were golfing or curling. I spent less time on creative stuff and had a successful careers, plural, than many men and women spend on the golf course every week. It was consuming because, just in quick contrast, today, the actual manuscript, when you're happy with it, is transferable with the click of a button virtually to however or wherever it's going to be produced, be it into a book form or whatever. It can be done in instants. Back then, typesetting had to be redone. It had to be retyped. Like if you had a manuscript, wherever you're getting it printed, they had to retype it into the various fonts. It all had to be created. Then you had to like today, but you had to choose covers and colors and designs and all of that stuff. Then you had to proof it all before it could even go to print. Then you had to order a quantity of titles to make it cost effective so that you could sell it at a price affordable or reasonable within the context of other books. And then you had to have room and space to stock. And roughly you needed about a minimum of 1,000 copy print run. So if you're talking your costs at $2.50 a book, you're talking $2,500 before you even get a book in your hand. And then if you're putting it into stores, you have to discount them 40%. So you might as well double that to 5 that you have to get to just begin to break even. And then you've got your other costs, advertising, promotions, all of that stuff, which you still do today, but you can probably get international promotion almost for free today. through a lot of the platforms. So for me, it became very consuming, and I dropped it after 1, 2, 3. I think I did 3 books with it. Today, I think the writers are fortunate that it's reasonably cost effective. If you're reasonably savvy, and you can print on demand. So if you want 10 copies, you can get 10.
That sounds like just an unbelievable difference. And so it's hard to believe that was only like 40 years ago that was the case.
Yeah. It seems like yesterday, but yeah, it eliminated a lot of people who might have had work published. So today, the nice thing is a lot of good work gets out there and is available. It's still a big investment of time and emotion and that for you guys, I'm sure.
So once you had the books in hand, you have 1,000 copies of a book.
Yes.
Where did they go from there? Like, did you give them, how did you distribute?
Any channel that I could get an interview on, like a little write-up about it, I would. But it was, again, like right now, you and I can talk right now, like we're live. Simple. And we could chat anytime we wanted to this way. But back then, there was no such thing as internet. So everything was snail mail. So therefore, unless you could drive to a particular, like I would go to newspapers and talk live within, say, a 30-mile radius or something. And I'd try to get readings and blah, 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 blah. But all of that had to be done either by phone, which ultimately is long distance if you're going a distance, or by mail. So you might mail the letter today and you might hear back 3 months. If you wanted to get a review, you had to mail copies. And there again, costs ultimately get in the way. I eventually threw out a few hundred of that first book. I just took them to the dump. I gave away a lot. For years afterwards, it was one of my giveaways whenever I did anything of any kind. It just became that. I don't know, maybe I sold 200 to 300 maybe, if I was lucky. Over the time, promotion was sucked, to tell you the truth. And then getting it into a store, if I got it in a few local stores and stuff nearby that I could drive to, but you had to get the product there. And if it was bookstores, if they were ordering it, which it would have happened occasionally, shipping costs, the whole deal, invoicing, they wouldn't pay. And bookstores, I don't know about today, but then they didn't have to pay. They had like 90 days or 120 days before they had to pay you. And within that time frame, they could return it to you and never not have to pay for it. So that really sucked.
It's still pretty hard to distribute when you're self-published. It's still very much a local game. I think you can go to your local store and distribute that way. But the print on demand stuff really makes a difference, not having to order 1,000 copies.
For you guys and gals that are doing it now, the starting local is the most sensible. You go from where you are. And if a particular work builds a bit of momentum, magic happens. Like I was always astonished where something that I would almost disregard or throw away, but I would do it anyway, could wind up leading to something magnificent. I wrote a book on writing way back in the early 80s. I did a monthly or whatever column on writing with the notion of putting it into a book, which the people putting out the magazine then were going to publish it into a book. And I eventually bought all the stock and started handling it myself. And I ran a full page ad in the Canadian Author and Bookman, which was a Canadian Authors Association magazine, with a coupon to send in. And I sold quite a few off of that. And I sent out flyers, like I would print them up, photocopy them, and mail them out to everything to do with writing that I could think of. And believe it or not, so I had a file box full of places, and magazines and writing clubs, the whole deal. And I got this one, I'll never forget, I got this one little letter from some little something out in Vancouver, out in British Columbia, I think it was Vancouver. And the guy wanted a couple of them. And I thought, oh, I'm not even going to bother with this, And I thought, oh, shit, I'm doing this, pardon my French, I'm doing this anyway. So I did it and la-da-da. The guy wound up buying, in terms of the book's life with where I owned it all, but more than anybody over time. Like he would order in small amounts, but he bought a few hundred. Like he had this writing connections out there. You never know. A friend of mine, Barry, they were having a reading down in Toronto, and I was going to that. I think I was reading something too. Anyway, so I had my briefcase full of stuff, and I had some copies of Small Things, which was the first Blue Heron Press book that I did. And I get bored easily, so I wander around wherever I am, no matter what I'm supposed to be doing. I stay out of trouble, but I just like to explore. It's my nature. So I'm a writer. Anyway, so I got yakking with the gal at the bar, and because I had nothing else, I like to talk, and she was leaving for Paris for meet a boyfriend over there, blah, 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 do 6 weeks or something in France. And I had a copy of this Small Things there, okay? Now get this. I said, look, I've always wanted, dream-wise, before worlds became difficult, to go to Paris, because that's where Hemingway was, and F. Scott Fitzgerald, and that whole era of magic, literary magic. I said, if I give you this book, would you take it to Paris with you and leave it at a fountain or something? That would be nice. I'd really like that. She said, sure. So I gave it to her, and it made me feel good. Whether it would ever happen or not, in the end, who knew, but the moment was great. About 3 years ago, I got an email from someone who had bought Small Things at a flea market in Paris. This is years later. To me, that was magical. That was worth all the crap.
That is so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is awesome. And it's also a lesson that whenever you travel anywhere, bring a copy of your book with you. You don't know who's going to ask for it.
Yeah.
You called Vegas your home away. It's where you've written a number of your stories. Mm-hmm. How did that come about? How did you start visiting Vegas, and what started it as your sort of writing center?
I've had houses and homes in a variety of places. I had, a family. My daughter's 40 now, and my grandkids are 18 and 13 or something. So I've had foundations and bases and so forth in my life, but I've never felt at home. Like that sense of, I didn't know what that feeling was. I'd sought it, but I never felt I had it. Anyway, so that's an important preface. One of my heroes was Sammy Davis Jr. since I was 16 years old. His book, Yes, I Can, influenced me tremendously. That book helped make me who I became. So that was the Vegas connection, because Vegas was big for Sammy as an entertainer, and then of course Sinatra, etc. Shania Twain and Celine Dion are both Canadian. And I'd always wanted to see them live. I was watching, from the time Celine first went to the Coliseum in Vegas, I was watching it studiously and her evolution there. And then I got wind that Shania was getting a residency there as well. And I thought, okay, this is something I'm going to do. I had not time on my hands, but I had time I could manage. I manage my own clock now. So I have for 20 years. So I thought, I'm going to see if it happens to be that they're both performing close by, then I'll go then and see them both on one trip. Okay. It was March in 2013 when I went, around the middle of March. I'd never been to Vegas. I got to Caesar's Palace. I booked there because that's where the shows were. And I thought, I don't know this town and I'm doing this solo. So hey, I don't want to wind up where I shouldn't be for one reason or another, just because I don't know better. I took a cab from the airport to Caesar's. On the way in, I talk if I can. Anyway, I got chatting with the cab driver. We just talked like human beings. As he was dropping me off, he said, you should check out the Wynn. And I said, what's that? And he told me it was a hotel, blah, 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 but it had some nice bars, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, I think you'll like it. I walked up the strip. I found out where the Wynn was. Now this is where it all begins to get real for me. I walk up, I get to the Wynn, and I'm just enjoying all the people and everything walking up the strip in daylight. I tend to keep regular hours in Vegas. I'm walking up the sidewalk into the Wynn, and there's the trees and everything. You know, I'm serious. A voice, it wasn't a little voice, it was a big voice inside my head, just filled it. And I have imagination, but this became too real. And the voice said, Frank, you're home. And so my real mind says to my head, if you can do that, I don't know how, but I'm not schizophrenic, honest. I say to myself, self, you're effing crazy. This is nuts. So I go a little bit farther and just relax. And I hear the same thing again. So I go into the Wynn and explore and go to Parasol Down, et cetera, et cetera. I kept going back there. That was the beginning. By the time I left, and actually right then, as soon as I first heard it, but I didn't want to acknowledge it, I felt at home. I just felt totally comfortable. I felt who I was, not that I have to hide it anywhere else. I mean, it's very clear what I am, that I'm, creative at times, but just so incompetently human in every other way. I went back in May, I got home, I booked another one. After I got back in May, Rod Stewart was doing Vegas, another residency at Caesars, and Celine was back again. I was just gonna go down, continue relaxing, just continue being in this place that seemed uncannily home for me. I forget what I'd finished, but I had done a lot of writing that year here in Canada. And I was determined not to write another word for the rest of the year, approximately 6 months. I got kidney stones, a couple of them. I had these tickets for Vegas and I didn't want, I just felt I had to go. And my doctor just says, you can't go. You got these stones. And I was booked to get, like they're gonna go in for them, right? They were that bad. And you can't go. I said, I'm going. And the surgeon guy, he said, if your family doctor says, okay, here's my personal card. And if you get in trouble, phone me and we'll be ready for you when we come back. So here I am on this kidney stone ride to Vegas. Not going to write a word. I forget what I was looking at on the plane down. A mother and a daughter were beside me in the 3-seat thing. Whatever I was looking at made one of them say, are you a writer? So I had to be honest and say, yeah, and I do a bit, blah, blah, blah. We chatted a bit about that and let it ride. I was so determined not even to think about writing. I get to the Wynn, and by then I had friends who worked at the Wynn. Like, they liked me. I was harmless and happy and didn't get into trouble and, polite, Canadian and normal, more or less, And then I went up to my room. I call it an angel lands on my shoulder. And usually, if a story idea sort of stays there for a while, won't leave me alone, with me, it's just incessant. And I have to write it to get rid of it. So get this. This is this trip to Vegas where I was just gonna relax, see a few shows, la-da-da-da-da. I had to write this story starting the next morning. Canadian time, 5:30 is 8:30 here is 5:30 Vegas time. 5:30 in the morning, I get up and I start writing the story. And I said, because I had kidney stones and I did have the odd shot of pain, and I made me think about, geez, what if this is it, So I thought, I'm gonna write this story as if it's the last story I ever write. I'm not gonna give an F. What goes into it, how it's shaped, anything. I'm just going to do it as if it's my last story, and who cares? So I wound up writing from 5:30 till 1 o'clock, 4 mornings in a row. And then of all things, I go wandering around near the Venetian, there's a big mall there, canal, something or other. I go wandering around there. I'm still trying to get away from writing during the time I'm not going to write, but I got to do this story because it won't leave me alone. So I'm wandering around there, and what do I find? Bowman's Rare Bookstore. Oh, geez, I didn't have a chance. I'm done on the 4th day with that story. And I thought, okay, good, I can relax. I think I had Celine's show that night. I'm done. I felt good, body relaxed, the whole deal. As I'm going downstairs from my hotel room, my computer dings. It's an email from Michael, the publisher of the magazine and books that I won the award for my story, The Poet. It was a call for submissions for stories about a climate change catastrophe that brings a conclusion to the world, or something like that. No guarantees, but they were looking for manuscripts. And I thought, damn it, Michael. You know, I was done. This is within those final seconds. What am I going to? I said, oh no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not even going to attempt it. I'm finished for the year, at least. So I went down to the deli, began having my lunch, and the first few lines of a story along those lines start coming to my head. I write them down on my napkin. I'll go upstairs and do it. I'll give it 1 hour on the clock. I haven't got a chance of making them, but I can say I tried. You know, with WordPerfect, you get the word count at the bottom. Or not MS Word. So I'm rattling away. I'm making typos like crazy. You'll see them in the story online. Typos like crazy, things weren't fitting together and it didn't seem to be working. And maybe it doesn't, but that's part of the charm. And so here we go. I made all that part of the story in the end of the world scenario, la-da-da-da-da, and it got cold in the room. So I even get up and change the thermostat. I made touching the thermostat it part of the story, la-da-da-da-da. I'm getting near the end of the hour. I'm thinking, oh no, I was closing in on 2,000 words. I don't think I can talk that many words in an hour. You might disagree. Anyway, so damn it, it was 2,207 or something words. Oh man, this is crazy. I didn't touch a thing, not a thing. Because in writing the story, I made all my errors part of the story as a result of the changes, la da 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 da. I sent it off to the editor, blah, 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 blah. But 6 weeks later, it was accepted and it's going in the journal.
I have read Last Man Standing, and then I read the other one that you wrote in Vegas in 2016. Yeah. It was a dark day, not a stormy night in something. I don't know how to pronounce the rest of it, right?
Okay,
I'm going to let you say that. But they're both kind of written in that like stream of consciousness style. Yes. Is that how you've always written your short stories, or did that come about in a different way?
I write many different ways, and I do songs different ways too. It depends on the story and how it kind of comes, if it comes from the whack on the shoulder, or if I'm consciously aware of a particular mood I want to create. There's another story, Winter, that might be published, oh golly, in the next few months, but it may not either. That's very straight and detail oriented and very real. The novels I'm doing, some of them are very real. So to answer your question more quickly, no, it's not how I do it all. It's almost like a song will come to me in a certain way, and that's the way it goes down. I don't consciously, but I don't. One thing I try not to do, and I've learned it, try not to consciously control the form of a particular work. And that's worked for me. I'm not suggesting it would work for someone else. And that's not to, like it, even Tuck Tiak Tuck, that one. I didn't touch the Last Man Standing because that was part of my plan. I figured I can't win with this one. There's no way they're gonna, whatever. But even Tuck Tiak Tuck, I went over it many, 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 many times after the initial outpouring, but I kept that feel.
How do you edit something like that? Like what is your process?
Totally by feel. I would say intuition, but it's not that out there. And I think it's the musician in me, which I came out of the womb as well. None of this was by my plan. I would have just loved to lived in a hammock for my whole life. But when you're doing a song as an artist, if you're playing Mozart by rote, by off the page, that's okay. Remarkable talents can do that. I can't and don't. I admire those who do. But I go by feel. And when I used to play in bands and stuff, it was by feel. So that's how I edit it. I go totally by feel. And if it's something that works, I stay relatively calm and my body's loose. And if it totally needs to go, or believe it or not, my tummy will tighten. And I'll reanalyze it, and I might put brackets around it, and they'll come back to it just to be sure. I'm usually pretty sure about things when it's final copy, and I've been able to go through it a couple of times without wondering about anything. It feels right. Is it technically right with me? Probably not. I don't try to be technically right.
So it also sounds like for that kind of story, you don't have anyone else look at it either.
No. That's
okay.
Almost a rule of mine. One time only. I was only 25 years old, but I'd written a story working on dialogue, and it was a little racy. And I shared it with someone who commented on it, and it ruined the story for me in that it took me years to be able to get back to it honestly, innocently is the better word, get back to it innocently as the creator, and to really do it the way it was intended for me to do it. So for me, I'm too, it gets in my head, it gets in the way of what I need to do.
That's unique, because I feel like a lot of people, myself included, we feel like you almost can't do anything with it until it's gone through another pair of eyes. And I'm jealous that you have this feeling of feeling that you can feel it when it's right. That's a remarkable gift to have.
I have great respect for anyone and however they do what they do, and what it is right or feels right or is doing it right for them. I have enormous respect for that and give it all kinds of space. But I require mine. I do. If it's working for you, don't mess with it. Don't mess with it. Keep doing it. If you hit snags, then look around for something to get you going maybe a different way. But don't mess with what's working.
So we're coming up on time here, but I do want to ask about your music.
Yeah.
So just tell me a little bit about that, since you're a musician as well as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have albums out right now, or how do you perform?
I drummed for 22 years. And I would when I was teaching school, I would just gig on weekends, or if somebody's drummer was sick, I'd go, I'd get the call. And I had the ability, that feel thing, I could sit in with anybody, even if I hadn't heard them or played them with them before, and make it work. The latter 10 years or so of my teaching, I did special ed again, and I was doing resource and that kind of thing, doing assessments and working with small groups and that kind of thing. Some of the kids I was working with were very young, 4 or 5, and I'd never worked with them that young before, 6. I knew how to work with them, but I didn't have a way of connecting. So there was an old guitar around the house, picked it up, learned a few kid songs to try to connect with them. So anyway, one thing led to another, and I guess the poet in me started falling out of the sky, the songs, and I began creating kids songs, which they really liked. I made a kids album and used it as a fundraiser for a home where I volunteered at. I didn't volunteer in the home, but as a fundraising person or a helper at their fundraisers for a home for young people with life-limiting illness. I did an album of drum solos at that time too. I figured while I'm in the studio, I'll bring my drum kit in and record. So I did a full album of drum solos just for posterity, just to show what I could do when I could still do it, the hands and feet. In a nutshell, I've written about 200 songs now. I did an album of an album of adult songs for everybody, like grown-ups, but not sleazy, just songs. And it was wrapped up in August of 2001, got back September 9/11. My friend Sandy got breast cancer. Oh, and another crisis in the personal crisis occurred. There was no heart to try to do anything with that. None, zero. But I continued over the intervening years writing songs and creating them and doing various gigs, fairly local. I did one of my songs, I did some called Somewhere Sweet in Vegas in December of 2019 at a place called Ichabod's. With songwriting, I do that like literary writing. I just let it come, let the music come. I might play with it for months afterwards till it feels right. It feels there.
I feel like this is going to be a big answer, but what's next?
I'll keep it short.
What's next for you in your writing journey? What are you working on now? What are you going to do next?
Quickly, a short story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the midst of. I have 4 books, 4 novels. Ding, 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 ding. And the odd column thing that I throw out there in the world. That's it. Short, eh?
And you're working on a volume of your stories as well?
It's done.
Oh, it's done.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I finished it at the end of October.
It sounds like most of the stuff that is available from you is up on your website because
yes.
You've submitted a lot of places that might not be readily available, but it sounds like you have compiled a number of things on your website.
Anybody can go there and look. And my plan is anything that has already been published, I'll put there, but there's a bit of time elapse before you can sometimes. Okay. But it's the best place to go. And if people don't like anything there, they're not going to like anything elsewhere.
Any social media or anything where people can follow you?
The picture on YouTube, if you go to Grandpa Frank or Frank Westcott, YouTube, there's some music there and some nice little videos, some fun kid songs, really fun ones.
Obviously, you have a strong affinity for Vegas, but there are a number of people and even a number of writers out there that would say, Vegas, are you crazy? You can't write there. What would you say to them?
First thing would be, I'm living proof that you can, because I do and I have, and significant amount, I think, has been published that I actually wrote there. For me, to answer the next question, maybe to preempt it, I would say, like for me, living in Vegas would not impact my writing negatively at all. I have what I would call more friends, real friends there today than I do. Now, granted, some of my dear friends have passed on, but dear friends today who live there than I do anywhere else in the world. So that says a lot. When I go there, I go to see my friends, see some live music, which there's a lot of, and just rest and relax, which I do. I relax there more than anywhere. If you've got a job there that no one else can do, that's an American, you can get special visas. And I've looked into it. If that day ever happens, I'll be there. If not, I'll be there a lot. And I would say for someone, like there's people who, when they go, whose experience of Vegas and what they do in Vegas is something totally out of their ordinary day-to-day life. They party, and that's okay. But there's people who go there not to just party, and I go there to live and be with my friends and see the entertainment, the shows, music that I like to see. So it feeds me too. And I feel at home there. So end of the day, that's where you feel at home. For a writer, if you can choose, then you live where you're going to write the best. Simple. Quick story, my one granddaughter who is the actor, I was taking her to one of her dance classes about 4 or 5 years ago. So keep in mind, she's only 8, 9 then. And she knew Vegas from me, of it. And we were going down the highway to this dance class, and it's a beautiful day. And I just said something about, it's a beautiful day. Wow. And she says, where do you want to go, Grandpa? And I said, I don't know. Where do you want to go? Vegas. She didn't know it was 5,000 miles across the country, but that says a lot too, because she got that from me. And so as far as Vegas, I don't think I need to say more. It is home.
Thank you for being here, and thank everyone for joining us, and we will see you next time.
We
Bye.
will. Take care. Bye-bye.